My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm 83 years old, and I've lived my whole life in the quiet town of Fairfield, Ohio. I was a school cafeteria worker for nearly 40 years and retired with just enough to cover my medicine and bills. I have arthritis in my knees, a hearing aid in my right ear, and a deep ache in my heart that never seems to leave. That ache has a name. His name is Carter. Let me tell you what happened. The auditorium was filled with lights, applause, and proud parents taking pictures of their children. I stood at the back, clutching the crumpled invitation that had no return address. I wore my Sunday dress, dark green with tiny yellow flowers, the same one I wore to my husband's funeral 10 years ago. My hair was curled, my shoes polished, my hands shaking. But my smile, it was steady. I was about to see Carter graduate. My only grandson. My whole world. I spotted him standing tall on the stage, in a crisp navy suit and an Ivy League sash. Columbia. The university I had spent years secretly raising money for, collecting bottles, baking pies for church sales, and even mopping up the elementary school gym at night after retirement. Also, he could get a chance at the life I never had. I waited for the crowd to thin. When I saw him alone by the university board and photographers, I stepped forward, tears already in my eyes. My voice cracked as I called, "Carter." He turned. He saw me. But instead of opening his arms like he used to when he was a boy, instead of smiling or rushing to hug me, he stepped back. He looked around nervously. Then he said, loud enough for the nearby students and their families to hear, "Oh, sorry. I think you're looking for the janitor's closet. It's down the hall." People laughed. Some turned to look at me in confusion. Others turned away out of second-hand embarrassment. My arms froze in midair. I felt 1,000 knives stab into my chest. Carter looked right through me as if I were nobody. As if I hadn't scraped together every coin and every prayer to put him on that stage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse. But all I did was nod like I didn't know him. Turned slowly. My knees nearly gave way. I walked back out into the hallway, leaning on the wall, breath shallow. And that's when I saw something even worse. Something that made the betrayal so much deeper, so much colder. Right outside the glass doors, Carter was hugging another woman. A woman I had never seen. She whispered something into his ear and they both laughed. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at me. Then she looked right at me through the glass and smirked. Who was she? And what had Carter told her about me? Now I need to tell you how we got here. 'Cause what you just heard, that wasn't the beginning. Well, it started long before that cruel moment. Back when Carter was still my little boy. Back when I believed love and sacrifice could fix anything. You see, Carter's mother, my daughter-in-law, left when he was only 5. My son, Michael, was in and out of jobs, never stable. It was me who raised Carter, wiped his nose, took him to school, made sure he ate his vegetables. It was me who held him when he cried after his father forgot to pick him up again. So how did I become the janitor in his life? That's what I need you to hear. Because maybe, just maybe, you've given your heart to someone who used it as a doormat. Started with the scholarship fund. And a lie I had to tell to make it happen. Please don't look away now. What happened next changed everything. And it started the moment I opened that envelope with Carter's name on it and no return address. If this story stirred your heart, made you angry, or reminded you of something deep within, please like, comment, and subscribe. This is just the beginning. Next chapter will show you the secrets behind that envelope. And how a grandmother's love can turn into heartbreak. The envelope had no stamp. Just my name, Grandma Margaret, scrawled across the front in black ink. I had found it tucked under my doormat one cold February morning, with frost on the windows and pain in my knees from the winter chill. I stared at the handwriting for a long time. It was familiar but hesitant, as if whoever wrote it had paused halfway through, unsure whether to keep going. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Columbia University. Early acceptance. Carter L. Ellis. Full tuition not covered. At the bottom were words written in Carter's hand. Grandma, I got in. I didn't tell Dad. He won't understand. Please don't tell anyone yet. I need $27,400 to fill the gap. I know it's a lot, but I'll make you proud. Promise. Carter. I sat down hard on the couch, tears spilling into my lap. I didn't have $27,400. My pension barely kept me afloat. My house had seen better days, and the roof still leaked in spring. But the way he ended the note, "I'll make you proud," stirred something deep inside me. It was the same phrase my late husband, Earl, had said before he went off to serve in Korea. He never made it back. Maybe that's why I couldn't say no. But how was I going to come up with that kind of money? The first thing I did was look around the house. I made a list of everything I could sell. The silver cutlery set from my wedding. My antique sewing machine. Listed online. I even parted with Earl's old coin collection. That hurt the most. Each sale chipped away at my memories. But I kept telling myself, he's worth it. Still, it wasn't enough. So I went to church. At Sunday service, Pastor Howard spoke about sacrifice and love. Afterward, I stood up during the fellowship hour and told the congregation about my grandson's acceptance letter. I didn't mention Carter's name, just said he was a bright young man with a dream, and I was his only family. I asked if anyone would buy my pies or cookies if I baked them during the week. The response was beautiful. Sister Bernice gave me her old folding table. Mr. Doyle printed flyers at the community center for free. And soon enough, Grandma's scholarship bake sale became a thing around Fairfield. Folks would line up after Sunday service, waiting for a slice of my pecan pie. It still didn't make enough, so I picked up the mop again. The elementary school I had once worked in was short on night staff. I asked the principal, a young woman named Miss Gracie, if she had anything I could do. She looked me over, my hunched shoulders, my swollen ankles, and said, "Margaret, are you sure?" "I'm not too old to scrub toilets," I replied with a smile. "I just need gloves that don't leak." 3 nights a week I cleaned those hallways. I wiped down desks, emptied trash bins, mopped floors, and scraped gum off the bottoms of chairs. Some nights, I could barely stand afterward. My fingers would lock up, and my back screamed for mercy. But I kept going. Every dollar went into a glass jar labeled Carter's Dream. And I never told him. I didn't want him to feel guilty. I wanted him to stand on that graduation stage one day, head high, not weighed down by the thought of his grandma scrubbing toilets for his tuition. But things got harder. My neighbor, Mrs. Kelly, passed away. She used to help me lift heavy boxes for the bake sales. Then my knees got worse. I slipped one night on a wet tile in the school gym and had to crawl to the staff room for help. I was out for a week after that. But I came back. Because Carter's next letter came with an invoice. Spring semester due. $6,200. No greeting. No "I miss you." Just the amount. Still, I mailed the check. I drained my savings. I even took out a small loan under my name. Something I swore I'd never do at my age. But when he called that week and said, "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma," I forgot the pain. I forgot everything. That voice. It brought back the boy who once made me macaroni necklaces, who called me his sunshine lady. But something began to shift. Carter's letters got shorter. His tone more businesslike. Sometimes when I called he wouldn't pick up. Or he'd send a quick text. "Busy. Class." When he came home for Christmas, he stayed for only 2 days. He didn't touch the pie. He didn't sit with me to watch the snow fall like we used to. He brought a girl named Kiara. She had sharp cheekbones and spoke fast, like her thoughts were too important to wait. She didn't look me in the eye once. That Christmas, Carter gave me a scarf. Expensive looking. Still had the tag. He barely hugged me. That's when I began to wonder. Was I just a checkbook now? One night, while organizing my receipts and Carter's invoices, I found something tucked behind a letter from the university. A copy of a campus newspaper article. Student Leadership Award. Carter Ellis, Columbia's rising star. The article mentioned how he'd come from a difficult upbringing, and overcame the odds on his own. On his own. I reread that line 10 times. I stared at it like it had stabbed me. Was he ashamed of me? Then the final straw came a few months later. An invitation. Not from Carter. From Columbia University. It was generic. No seat number. No formal mention of guests. Just a printed program with the graduating students' names, including Carter's. Called him. No answer. Texted. I got the invite. Should I come? 2 days later he replied. If you want. But there's limited space. Dress nice. No, can't wait to see you. No, thanks for everything, Grandma. Still I packed my bag. Bought a bus ticket with the last few dollars in my wallet. Took a ride I could barely sit through. And that's how I ended up in that auditorium. Smiling. Ready to hug him. Only to be called the janitor. And now, outside those glass doors, I saw him laughing with that same girl, Kiara. The one who didn't look me in the eye. She looked right through me again. And this time Carter didn't even flinch. Was this how our story ended? Or was it only the beginning of something far more painful? Because what I found in the days after that graduation changed everything. And for the first time I had to decide, should I keep protecting Carter? Or finally protect myself? If this story made your heart ache or reminded you of the power of a grandmother's love, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The next chapter will reveal what I found hidden in Carter's life, and why he truly tried to erase me. I didn't sleep the night after the graduation. I sat by the window in the guest house I had scraped together enough to rent for a night, barely a step up from a roadside motel. I left the lamp on, the one that flickered, and I kept my coat wrapped around me though the heat was on. Not because I was cold but because I was holding myself together. I played Carter's words in my head again and again. I think you're looking for the janitor's closet. I heard the laughter in the background. The way he looked around nervously like I was some stray who didn't belong in his new, polished world. And then the image of Kiara's smirk. Like she had won something I didn't even know was a competition. But it wasn't until I looked at my hands, wrinkled, calloused, still dusted with sugar from the last pie batch I'd made before leaving, that I realized something. I had given up everything. For what? For a boy who now treated me like dirt beneath his designer shoes. Yet, I couldn't hate him. Not yet. The next morning I left Columbia quietly. I didn't say goodbye. I took the same slow bus back to Fairfield, hugging my bag tightly. Inside was the last check I had planned to give him. $1,500. A small gift to help him with his move into postgraduate life. But I couldn't bring myself to mail it anymore. Back home the town was unchanged. The pothole on 3rd Street was still there. Mr. Doyle waved at me from his porch. And the church bell rang at noon like always. But something inside me had shifted. I didn't unpack. I went straight to my storage box, the one I kept in the closet. In it were all of Carter's letters, his childhood drawings, a report card from 3rd grade with a gold star and "excellent in math" scribbled on it. And then, tucked behind the last envelope, was something I had almost forgotten. Return address. Carter had accidentally left it on the back of one envelope months ago. It wasn't his dorm address. It was an apartment in Brooklyn. Curious, I pulled it out and stared. It didn't match anything I knew. I decided to write a letter. Not to Carter, but to the landlord. I pretended to be interested in renting the apartment. I asked who was currently staying there and if I could get in touch. A week later I got a response. The landlord didn't write much. Just enough. Yes, the unit is still occupied by Carter Ellis and Kiara Walters. They've been here 2 years. Paid in full upfront for the lease. No issues. 2 years. He had told me he was in the dorms. And he had paid upfront. I felt something snap in my chest. That's when I knew. He hadn't just pushed me aside at graduation. He had been hiding his entire life from me. For 2 years. I checked the return address again, then did something I never thought I'd do. I asked Miss Gracie at the school if she could help me get a copy of Columbia's financial aid policy. She was happy to help, Thought it was for a local student. And when I got it, my knees nearly gave out. Carter had been on a full-ride scholarship. His tuition was covered by an academic grant and 2 merit-based awards, which meant all the money I sent, all the mopping, the baking, the selling of Earl's coin collection, it was never needed. He lied. And not just a little lie. A big, bleeding, rotten one. I clutched the folder and sobbed on my kitchen floor until I couldn't breathe. Why? Why would he do this? Was it for Kiera? Was it for pride? Or was I nothing more than a wallet in his eyes? The next Sunday I went to church and sat in the back pew. I didn't bake. I didn't greet. I didn't smile. After the service, Pastor Howard stopped me. "Margaret," he said gently, "we haven't seen your pies lately." I opened my mouth to lie, but instead I cried. Right there in the aisle, in front of the stained glass, I let it all out. The bake sales, the janitor shifts, the betrayal, the lie. And Pastor Howard didn't say much. Just put his hand on my shoulder. "God sees what people try to bury," he whispered. "And sometimes he lets the truth boil to the surface." I went home and stared at the check again. The $1,500 I'd meant to give Carter. I decided I wasn't done. Not yet. If he could pretend I didn't exist, I could find out why. I called in a favor from Clara, my old friend whose niece lived in Brooklyn. She said she'd pass by the apartment building and tell me what she saw. 2 days later, Clara called me, voice trembling. "Margaret, I saw him." I held the phone tightly. And he was wearing a suit. Fancy. Stepping into a BMW. And Kiera. She was wearing Chanel. I saw the logo. Closed my eyes. Did they look happy? Clara hesitated. They looked like they had no worries in the world. That night, I opened Carter's childhood box and pulled out a drawing he once made of U.S. stick figures of Grandma and Carter standing under a rainbow with "My Hero" scrawled above my head. I held it in my lap for hours, until the ink blurred with tears. Then I made my decision. I was going to confront him. In person. No more letters. No more hoping he'd come around. But I wasn't going to Brooklyn empty-handed. I made 3 copies of every bank transfer I'd ever sent. I printed his scholarship records. And I packed the scarf he gave me that Christmas. Tag still on. Because when I knocked on his door, I was going to bring the truth with me. And this time, he wouldn't be able to laugh it off. But what I didn't know was that someone else would open the door. And they would tell me something I never saw coming. If this story is pulling your heartstrings, making you question the price of love and betrayal, like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will take you to Carter's doorstep and reveal a hidden secret even I wasn't prepared for. I arrived in Brooklyn on a gray, wind-whipped morning. The sky hung low like it was holding its breath. I stepped off the bus with a satchel over my shoulder. Inside it, every receipt, every bank statement, every printed lie I had collected over the last 6 months. My cane clicked sharply against the sidewalk, echoing through the rows of brownstones like a ticking clock. I hadn't called ahead. I didn't want to give Carter time to come up with another lie. I wanted to look him in the eyes and ask the one question that had gnawed at me every night since graduation. Why? The apartment building was a newly renovated one. No cracks in the pavement. No rusted gates. It was the kind of place young professionals with tech jobs lived. Not struggling students. I buzzed the unit. No answer. I buzzed again, longer this time. Then I saw the door to the building swing open. A young woman walked out, phone in hand, barely glancing at me. Before the door closed, I slipped inside. My heart pounded. I was doing something I never thought I would. Sneaking into my own grandson's life. I climbed the stairs slowly. My knees ached with every step, but I refused to stop. Finally, I stood outside apartment 4B. Carter's name was on the mailbox. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. Then I heard footsteps. But the voice that came from behind the door wasn't his. It was hers. "Who is it?" Kara. Froze. Then I spoke, my voice low but firm. "It's Margaret. Carter's grandmother." There was a pause. Long one. Then the sound of the lock turning. When the door opened, Kiara stood in a silk robe, her hair tied back. She looked surprised, but not scared, not guilty. "Wow," she said, leaning on the frame. "You really are persistent." And blinked. "Excuse me." She smiled. "He said you might show up one day. Honestly, I thought it would be sooner." I felt a cold chill run down my back. "Where's Carter?" She sighed and opened the door wider. "He's not here. Took a trip with some partners. Vegas, I think. They're celebrating his new business launch." I stepped inside past her. The apartment was bigger than I imagined. Marble counters. Massive TV. Everything screamed wealth. I set my satchel on the table and turned to her. "I came to give him this." I pulled out the stack of receipts and letters. She looked at them briefly, then shrugged. "He doesn't need your money, Margaret," she said. "He never did. And honestly, you gave it too easily." Flinched. "What do you mean?" She sat on the edge of the couch, crossed her legs. "You think you're the only one he played. Please. Carter's brilliant. Manipulative but brilliant. He knew exactly how to get what he wanted from you." I stared at her, stunned. "He used me," I whispered. She laughed softly. "Used you. He built himself on you. And you were so desperate to matter. You handed it all over." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Then she said something that made my knees buckle. "He told me you were a crazy old lady. Said you used to be his janitor at school and you got obsessed with him. Started mailing him money. Said it was easier to let you believe the fantasy than try to fix it." I fell into the armchair behind me. I couldn't breathe. Everything inside me cracked. All the pies. All the sleepless nights. All the prayers. He didn't just lie. He rewrote me out of his life completely. "Why would he do that?" I asked, barely able to speak. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Because he could. And because you never asked for anything in return." I sat there, shattered. And that's when she pulled out her phone and scrolled through something. "You think he didn't know what he was doing? He made a whole thread about you once. How to get old people to fund your dreams. It went viral in one of his startup groups." She turned the screen toward me. There I was. My photo. The church bake sale. Captioned, "The Bank of Grandma. How I Turned Emotional Guilt into Ivy League Funding." I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Something inside me had died. But in its place, something else began to grow. Not anger. Not revenge. But clarity. I stood slowly, picked up my folder, and said, "Tell him I came. Tell him I'm done." Kiara raised an eyebrow. "That's it." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "No," I said quietly. "That's not it. It's just the beginning." I left her apartment with trembling legs and a fire in my chest. I didn't know how yet. But Carter was going to learn something very important. That you don't build empires on the backs of the people who love you and expect them never to notice. That night, back in Fairfield, I made a call. To a lawyer I knew from church. Then I called Pastor Howard. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the local newspaper. Because Carter Ellis wasn't just my grandson anymore. He was about to be a lesson. To every person who had ever betrayed someone who gave them everything. But before the story could break, something else happened. Someone knocked on my door in the middle of the night. And when I opened it, it wasn't Carter. It was someone holding a briefcase and a warning. If this chapter hit you in the gut like it did me, please like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will reveal the midnight visitor. And the secret Carter never wanted me to find. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. The knock came at 1:12 a.m. I had just drifted into sleep, my body aching from the long ride back from Brooklyn and the weight of everything I just learned. At first I thought I'd imagined it. But then it came again. 3 firm knocks, no hesitation. I reached for my robe and cane and shuffled to the door, heart pounding in my chest. My porch light had burned out 2 weeks ago, so all I could see through the peephole was a shadow. "Who is it?" called. A man's voice responded, low and clear. "Mrs. Ellis. My name is Terence Cole. I'm an attorney. I represent a client who would like to speak with you. Urgently." I almost didn't open the door. But something about his voice. It wasn't threatening. It was urgent, like he had something I needed to hear. So I unlocked the chain and opened it a crack. A black man in his early 40s stood there in a dark gray suit, despite the hour. He held a briefcase in one hand and looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I know it's late," he said. "But I promise I wouldn't be here if it weren't serious. May I come in?" I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. He entered quietly, sat at my kitchen table, and waited for me to take a seat across from him. "Who sent you?" asked, voice steady. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "First, let me apologize. You've been lied to, Mrs. Ellis. And it's time someone told you the truth. Not just about your grandson, but about the money you sent." I narrowed my eyes. He slid the folder across the table. Inside were bank records, dozens of them, showing transfers, withdrawals, even shell company names I didn't recognize. "What is this?" "Your grandson," he said, "has been part of an investment fraud circle. He used emotional appeals to solicit money, then funneled it through a network of fake scholarship campaigns. You were the pilot test model. After you, he replicated it with dozens of other elderly sponsors, most pretending to be family friends, mentors, church members." I clutched my chest. "You're saying I wasn't the only one?" He shook his head. "You were the first. He built the system using your name, your trust. He even filed a false 501c3 nonprofit called the Ellis Educational Foundation. Never existed. But the money sure did." I couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down my face as I flipped through the papers. There was even a screenshot of an investor pitch deck. The grandma model. How emotional capital beats venture capital. That's when I understood. I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been used. Paraded like a strategy. "I can't believe this," I whispered. "Believe it," Terence said gently. "And before you ask, yes, he's being investigated. That's why I'm here. We need you. Need me. You're the only one with a full paper trail. You kept every receipt, every deposit. You can help us unravel the whole scheme. But more than that, you can stop him before he ruins more lives." I stared down at my lap. I was just an old woman. My knees ached. My heart felt like it had been split in half. But somewhere beneath all that pain was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. What would I have to do? He pulled out another folder. "You'd give a statement, possibly testify. But we want to make this public. We want to show what he's done. The media is already watching him because of his new company. You could expose everything." I hesitated. Not because I didn't want justice, but because I knew once I crossed that line, Carter would never look at me the same again. Then I remembered something Kiera said. "You never asked for anything in return." She was right. I had given and given and given, thinking love would protect me. That if I just stayed quiet, stayed good, it would come back around. But I was done being quiet. I nodded slowly. "I'll do it." Terence smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. You may have just saved a dozen other grandmothers from the same fate." He left after that, leaving me with a new folder, this time filled with next steps, affidavit templates, and media contacts. I stayed up the rest of the night. Not crying. Planning. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked to the church office and asked to use the copier. Sister Bernice helped me. We made 20 copies of every document. Some for the DA, some for the journalists, and one just for me. Then I called the local newspaper again. This time I wasn't offering a quote. I was offering the truth. And they took it. 3 days later, the story hit the front page. Local grandmother exposes scholarship scam. Her own grandson at the center. My phone rang nonstop. Neighbors came by. the bake sale group cried. Even Pastor Howard called me a voice for the voiceless. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but deep down, I just felt hollow. Until the letter came. No return address. Inside it, a single sheet of paper. Just one sentence. I hope you're proud of yourself. You just destroyed me. No signature. But I knew that handwriting. It was Carter's. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't apologized. He had only blamed me. I folded the letter neatly. And I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't over. Not yet. Because Carter was still out there, building a brand, smiling in interviews, pretending to be someone he wasn't. And if he wouldn't face me, I'd face him. In the place where he least expected it. In front of everyone. But just as I started planning my next move, a knock came again. This time it wasn't an attorney. It was a young woman, maybe 21, brown curls, nervous eyes. And the first words out of her mouth shook me to my core. Are you Margaret Ellis? I'm your grandson's other grandmother. If this chapter made your heart race and your jaw drop, don't scroll past. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter is coming, and trust me. The other grandmother has a story that changes everything. I stared at the girl on my porch for a full 5 seconds before I even blinked. My hand was still gripping the edge of the doorframe, my knuckles white, as if letting go would somehow make her disappear. My grandson's what? Asked, my voice brittle. She shifted nervously, glancing behind her as if unsure whether to run or speak. My name is Ava, she said softly. My mother, she's Carter's other grandmother. On his mother's side. She sent me to find you. Carter's mother. I hadn't heard that name spoken in nearly 2 decades. Lauren. The woman who had walked out of Carter's life when he was barely 5 years old, leaving me to clean up the mess she and my son made. I had always assumed she vanished completely. I didn't know Carter was still in contact with her, I said, my voice shaking. Eva nodded. He wasn't. Not until recently. He came looking for her after he started making money. He found us. He never told you, did he? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The pieces began to shift violently in my mind. Carter had reconnected with his mother's side of the family, but not once had he mentioned it to me. Instead, he fed me lie after lie while playing family with strangers. I swallowed hard. Why are you here? I asked, eyeing her carefully. What does your mother want from me? Ava reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She wanted me to give you this. I took it, my hands trembling. She said she couldn't face you herself. Said you'd understand why when you read it. She turned and began to walk away. I wanted to call her back, ask a million questions, but I couldn't form the words. I closed the door slowly behind me and walked to the kitchen table. Then I opened the letter. It was handwritten. Delicate, precise, like someone who was trying not to shake. Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to reach out. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you a truth I should have told you 20 years ago. Carter didn't just inherit my last name. He inherited my secrets. When I left him with you, I wasn't just running from Michael. I was running from myself. I had debts, Margaret. Serious ones. The kind that follow you even across state lines. Carter's real father wasn't Michael. Michael never knew. And when he found out, I panicked. I took what I could and ran. I never stopped watching from afar. I never stopped wondering what kind of boy he'd become. When he showed up 2 years ago saying he was building a new life, I was proud. But I didn't know what he'd done to get there. Not until I found the files. I confronted him, Margaret. He told me to stay out of it or he'd cut me off again. He said he didn't need 2 grandmas clinging to the past. That's why I'm writing you now. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I had to tell you the truth. Please stop him before he becomes what I once was. Lauren. I dropped the letter. Carter wasn't Michael's son. My mind raced. Everything I'd done, every sacrifice, was for a boy who wasn't even my blood. But the ache in my chest told me something else. It didn't matter. Blood had nothing to do with it. I raised that boy. I held him through night fevers. I stayed up with him during storms. I packed his lunches, wiped his tears, taught him how to tie his shoes. He was mine. But now I understood why he had discarded me so easily. He had been raised on secrets, and then built his empire on lies. And he thought love was just another resource. But I was about to show him something money couldn't buy. The next day I met Terrence, the attorney, again. I want to go public, I said. On camera. I want to tell my story in my own voice. He looked surprised. You're sure? I'm not hiding anymore. If Carter wants to destroy everything I stood for, I'll make sure he does it in front of the whole world. We scheduled an interview with a major news outlet. One that had already been circling the story, hungry for a scoop. They agreed to meet me at the church, the place where my journey had started. I wore my Sunday best. The same green dress. This time with pride. The camera rolled. I told them everything. From the envelope with the tuition gap to the bake sales, to mopping gym floors, to the slap in the face at graduation. I showed them the scarf, the text, the photos from the online threads. And then I said, with a trembling but clear voice, I gave that boy everything I had. Not because he earned it, but because I believed in who he could become. Now I see what he became instead. But let me be clear. I don't regret loving him. I regret not loving myself enough to see when it became abuse. That line hit people like thunder. The interview went viral. Emails poured in. Letters. Messages from grandmothers, mothers, aunts, mentors. People who had been used, manipulated, discarded. My story was no longer just mine. It was ours. But Carter. He wasn't silent. He responded with a lawsuit. He filed a defamation claim, claiming I was mentally unstable, that I was slandering him because he refused to financially support a delusional relative. Terrence called me 2 hours after the papers were served. Are you okay? He asked. I laughed. Actually laughed. Let him come, I said. Because now, I want my day in court. But Carter wasn't done scheming. That same night I got a message from an unknown number. It was a video. Carter, sitting in a high-rise office, wearing his expensive suit, smirking. You want to play hardball, Grandma? Let's see how the court feels when I expose your little secret. The one about the loan you defaulted on. The debt collectors. The years you weren't paying taxes while claiming bake sale income. He leaned forward into the camera. You still think people will believe a janitor over a CEO? I watched the whole thing twice. Then I smiled. Because I had nothing left to lose. And he had everything. But just when I thought I had the upper hand, Terrence called me again. Only this time his voice wasn't steady. Margaret, you might want to sit down. What is it? He asked. It's about Carter's real father. Someone tracked him down. He's not just alive. He's in Fairfield. My blood ran cold. He continued. And he wants to meet you. If you're still with me, please like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will shake the truth wide open as the man I never expected to face steps into my life. And changes everything I thought I knew about my past and Carter's future. I didn't leave the house that day. I sat in my armchair, the same one Earl used to sit in, the one with the worn patch on the left armrest where he'd rest his hand as he read the Sunday paper. The sun came and went across the sky while I stayed frozen, Terrence's words echoing in my head. Carter's real father is in Fairfield. My mind refused to wrap around it. Not just that he was alive, but that he was here, in my town. My quiet little corner of the world where I'd built a life from nothing and raised Carter with the belief that his father had walked out on him, because that's what Lauren led me to believe. Had I been raising someone else's secret all along? I called Terrence again that evening. I need to know everything, I said, my voice firm. He didn't hesitate. His name is Vincent Miles. He's a retired investment banker. Early 50s. Lives in a small house just 3 blocks from the community garden. He moved here 6 months ago. Said he wanted to get closer to unfinished business. Unfinished business. That unfinished business was my life. I walked to his house the next morning. I didn't even take my cane. My legs screamed with every step, but I needed to feel the pain. I needed to know that I was still strong enough to stand face to face with the truth. The house was quiet. Small porch, clean steps, no visible signs of wealth. It was modest, humble. A far cry from the high-rise luxury Carter lived in. I knocked. The man who answered looked like a ghost of a younger time. Broad shoulders. Ash-gray stubble along his jawline. Eyes that had seen too much and still tried to hide it. He looked stunned when he saw me. "Margaret," he said softly. I didn't say anything. He stepped aside and motioned for me to enter. We sat in silence for a long time. Then I finally broke it. "Tell me why you're here." He exhaled. "Because I saw the story. On the news. I recognized your name and then I saw Carter. I knew he was mine the moment I looked at him." My mouth went dry. "You knew all these years?" "I didn't know he existed," he said. "Lauren never told me. We had an affair. One night. She said she was married but unhappy. I walked away. She vanished. I never knew she got pregnant." I narrowed my eyes. "And now you're here. After all this time. For what?" He swallowed hard. "To help. To make it right. I have no right to call myself his father, but I can help stop him from becoming the kind of man I once was." I didn't want to believe him, but there was something in his voice. Kind of regret I recognized. A kind I carried too. "Still," I asked, "did you know what Carter was doing? The scam?" He nodded slowly. "I learned about it last month. I kept quiet, hoping he'd come to his senses. But then I saw how he treated you. And I realized. He'd become the worst parts of both his parents." Flinched. "But it's not too late," Vincent said. "If we work together we can stop him. You have the legal trail. I have the funding to take this public professionally. We could sue for damages, expose the foundation, press criminal charges." Understood. "You want to be a hero now?" "No," he said quietly. "I just want to help the woman who did the job I didn't even know I abandoned." I didn't answer. I left his house without saying goodbye. But the next morning I called Terrence. "Let's go to court," I said. "But let's go loud. I want every camera in that room. I want every person Carter scammed to see his face when the truth lands in front of a judge." We filed the charges that day. Fraud. Wire transfers. Tax evasion. Identity manipulation. The whole package. And because of Vincent's financial support, we had the top forensic accountant in the state comb through every digital trail Carter left behind. The media picked it up again. The interview requests doubled. And Carter, he went quiet. Until the subpoena landed. He couldn't hide anymore. But just when I thought I was ready, I got the second letter. From Carter himself. It arrived in a sleek black envelope. Inside a handwritten note. "Grandma, you've made your point. Get it. You want to destroy me. But I need you to understand. I didn't do this because I hated you. I did it because I didn't want to become you. You lived small, quiet, forgotten. I didn't want that for myself. I'm sorry if that hurt you. But I'm not sorry for getting out. If this goes to court, I'll drag you through every mistake you've ever made. Remember the $4,000 loan you defaulted on in 1998? The missed tax filings in 2003. You want the world to hear that. Fine. But know this. I'll burn it all down before I let you win. Carter." I reread it twice. Then I smiled. Not out of joy, but out of clarity. He didn't hate me. He feared me. Because now he knew. I wasn't the janitor anymore. I was the reckoning. And reckoning had a court date. But I wasn't just taking him to court. I was taking me back. Every lost year. Every unpaid night. Every moment of silence I gave in exchange for love that never came. But on the eve of the trial, there was one more twist. Terrence called again. "There's a problem," he said. "What now?" "Yes. There's a motion filed. Carter's team is pushing to block your testimony. They're claiming mental incompetence due to age." I laughed bitterly. They think I'm too old to know the truth. They're going to bring in a psychologist. Try to paint you as unstable. Say your story can't be trusted. That you're just a bitter woman trying to ruin her grandson's success. I stared out the window at the setting sun. Well, I said calmly, then I guess I'll have to remind them. And I turned slowly, staring into my own reflection. Exactly what a grandmother is capable of. If you believe truth doesn't expire with age, and strength only deepens with time, then like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter is the grand finale. The courtroom, the showdown, and the one moment that will leave every viewer speechless. The courthouse was packed. Rows of reporters filled the benches. Cameras clicked. Microphones lined the front steps. The sun hung low behind the courthouse, casting long shadows across the marble floor inside, like even the light itself was hesitant to enter a space so filled with lies, shame, and long-buried truth. I stood at the entrance in my dark blue suit, one that Clara loaned me from her late sister's collection. My hands trembled slightly as I tightened the pearl buttons. The pearls used to belong to my mother. She always said, if they don't hear your voice, make sure they see your dignity. I wasn't here just as Margaret Ellis, the old woman Carter called a janitor. I was here as the voice of every forgotten grandmother, every unseen woman who raised a generation only to be erased when the lights came on. When I entered the courtroom, Carter was already there. He sat at the defendant's table, his navy suit sharp as a knife, his hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. He didn't look at me as I walked past, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. But his jaw twitched just barely. He felt me. Terence leaned in. Ready? He nodded. I've been ready my whole life. The judge, a silver-haired woman with steel in her eyes, called the case to order. State of Ohio versus Carter L. Ellis. Charges: fraud, misrepresentation, and financial abuse of the elderly. Carter's lawyers moved fast. They filed to block my testimony immediately. Your Honor, the defense attorney said, our client has evidence that Mrs. Ellis has a history of cognitive instability, including memory lapses and erratic behavior. We believe her testimony could be misleading or emotionally manipulated. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have medical documentation? We have witness statements suggesting confusion and delusion, and a petition for psychological review. That's when Terence stood. Your Honor, we anticipated this tactic. We have a statement from a licensed neurologist who examined Mrs. Ellis last week. Cognitive function is above average for her age. No signs of impairment. And we also have a list of over 20 witnesses prepared to testify to her lucidity, leadership, and sound judgment. The judge stared at Carter's team. Denied. Mrs. Ellis will take the stand. The defense lawyer flinched. And Carter, he finally looked at me. A flicker of something crossed his face, something between fear and disbelief. As I stood and made my way to the witness box, I felt the weight of everything I carried. 40 years of work, 20 years of silence, and the pain of loving someone who had no intention of loving you back. I took the oath. Then I told the truth. I spoke plainly. I told the court about the envelope with Carter's request for money, the bake sales, the janitorial shifts, the sleepless nights. I told them about every dollar, every transfer, every lie. I pulled out receipts. I showed text messages. Photos of me kneeling in the church kitchen with flour on my face and hope in my eyes. I even pulled out Carter's childhood drawing, the one with the rainbow and "My Hero" scribbled above my head. My mistake, I said, holding it up for the courtroom, was believing this would always be enough. That love would be remembered. But sometimes the people we raise don't become who we hoped. Sometimes they become what we feared. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed to blink back emotion. Then came the defense's cross-examination. Their lawyer leaned in, his voice sharp. Mrs. Ellis, isn't it true that you defaulted on a loan in 1998? That you had medical debt, unpaid taxes, and even once skipped a license renewal? I smiled gently. Yes, I was poor. And sometimes poor people fall behind. But I never stole. I never lied. I never manipulated anyone to climb higher. And I never used someone's love as a ladder. He tried to press further. But the damage was done. Because what he didn't realize was that his attack proved my point. I wasn't perfect. But I was honest. And Carter was not. The trial continued for hours. Witnesses testified. Kiara surprisingly didn't show. The judge subpoenaed records from Carter's nonprofit foundation. The accounts didn't just match mine. They revealed even more victims. One was an elderly man from Tulsa who mortgaged his house to fund a scholarship. Another was a widow from Florida who believed she was helping her godson. All of them fed into Carter's machine. And then came the turning point. A recording. Vincent, Carter's biological father, took the stand. He submitted a voice recording Carter had sent him months ago. One Carter didn't know he'd saved. In it, Carter said, "They're just old people. They want to feel useful. I'm not stealing. I'm giving them a purpose. If they die happy, what's the harm?" Gasps echoed through the room. Carter's face went pale. The judge called for order. And that was the end. The gavel came down like thunder. Guilty. All counts. Sentencing to follow. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and breathed. It was over. Carter was taken into custody pending sentencing. As he passed me, escorted by 2 bailiffs. He paused for just a second. I looked at him. I didn't hate him. I pitied him. He traded love for power. And he lost both. Outside, reporters swarmed me. "Mrs. Ellis, do you have a statement?" I held up my hand. "I'm not here to be famous," I said. "I'm here because too many people think silence is safer. But silence only protects the guilty." Broke mine. And I hope someone watching today finds the courage to break theirs too. The crowd applauded. Later that night, back home, I sat in my kitchen holding that childhood drawing again. Not because I still believed in it, but because I had earned the right to reclaim it. Love doesn't always come back the way you gave it. But truth always finds its way. And mine had just filled a courtroom. The next day, a letter arrived from a young woman in Kansas. She wrote, "Thank you for being loud when others weren't. I was scammed by someone like Carter too. I lost my savings. But hearing you speak made me feel whole again." I folded the letter gently and smiled. 'Cause now, I wasn't just a grandmother. I was a voice. And the world finally heard me. If this story moved you, reminded you of your own power, or simply made you feel seen, like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters too. And somewhere out there, someone is waiting to hear it.